Hello! Happy Friday the 13th. Whoa! It's Friday the 13th. Did you notice? Did you have bad luck? Oh boy. Gotta look at myself in the camera and I look tired. Not puppy though. Oh, hello. Can't really see in the camera, but his tail is wagging. Wag, 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 wag. uh, he's so cute. Waggy puppy. Oh, Waggy puppy probably wants a treat and wants me to go to the couch. He definitely wants a treat because I reached for my glass and he jumped up. Hmm? Okay, okay. Even though you didn't finish your dinner. Nom 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 nom. Nom 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 nom. Nom nom nom. Oh, Gesundheit. Oh, sneezy puppy. Gesundheit. Gesundheit. You still have lots of dinner left. You could eat that. I don't want that. I want treats. Well, it's probably a good thing that I'm feeling sleepy. Hopefully I'll be able to get a normal night's sleep and get sort of back onto a semblance of a schedule. That would be good. And then up early tomorrow to head out to Chilliwack to visit friends. And that will be good. I'm looking forward to that. Got the Reading Rainbow song stuck in my head because I looked at that comic aggressively one-upping butterflies. Take a look. It's in a book. A reading rainbow. It's okay. Nobody else is in the stream right now. I'm pretty sure. Though, I guess that will make its way onto YouTube. We're on page 123 in our book. Auspicious, is it? 123 on day 1-3? Because it's the 13th. Who knows? Who knows? Not me. Hello, Sharkies! Happy Friday the 13th! Is that something that you're supposed to? Probably not. But then again, I don't think Friday the 13th really has like an official anything that you're supposed to say or do. Try to avoid getting stabbed. Or, I don't know, have your dreams? Honestly, I've never actually watched any of the movies. Are the movies the source of Like, which came first? Something being unlucky about Friday the 13th or the movies? I wonder what the source of Friday the 13th being an unlucky day is originally. Because I don't actually know that I've ever really heard anything about it. Chucky say Friday the 13th is never really a thing I mark with any sort of notice other than noting the date. Yeah. Farmos is pretty sure the movies used the superstition, not the other way around. Yeah, that's what I would guess, but again, I haven't seen the movies at all, so let's see. What if I ask the internet origin of Friday? Oh, it auto-completed. According to folklore historian Donald Dosey, the unlucky nature of the number 13 originated with a Norse myth about 12 gods having a dinner party in Valhalla. The trickster god Loki, who was not invited, arrived as the 13th guest and arranged for I don't know, to shoot Balder with a mistletoe-tipped arrow. Okay, so I guess it's a combination of 13 being an unlucky number, and then while there is evidence of both Friday and the number 13 being considered unlucky, there is no record of the two items being referred to as especially unlucky in conjunction before the 19th century. And apparently, an early documented reference in English occurs in H.S. Edwards' biography of Gioacchino Rossini, who died on a Friday 13th. Rossini was surrounded to the last by admiring friends, and if it be true that, like so many Italians, he regarded Fridays as an unlucky day and 13 as an unlucky number, it is remarkable that on Friday the 13th of November he passed away. Mr. Sharky had a migraine today, so that was unlucky. Let's see. You were mentioning religious ideas, and this says Christian associations. The superstition seems to relate to various things, like the story of Jesus' Last Supper and crucifixion, in which there were 13 individuals present in the upper room on the 13th of Nisan Maundy Thursday. I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry. The night before his death on Good Friday. Oh, and it is possible that the publication of 1907 of T.W. Lawson's popular novel, Friday the 13th, contributed to popularizing the superstition. In the novel, an unscrupulous broker takes advantage of the superstition to create a Wall Street panic on a Friday the 13th. Mrs. has a D&D character she hasn't got to play too much yet who is very superstitious. Done a bit of research on obscure Western superstitions to use in gameplay. That's fun. It's fun to have, I don't know, social quirks and things for your characters. Something to distinguish you other than just your class and, whatever backstory, but like things, behavior patterns that distinguish your character are entertaining. I don't actually get to play characters in D&D very often, other than, NPCs and things, because I'm more often running the game than playing in it. Sharky's sorceress, whose main character trait is that she distrusts book learning. but puts a lot of trust in oral tradition. Reminds you a lot of Pratchett's witches, actually. Nice, nice. Other than Magrat, who reads them Grimmers. Before you got here, I was saying that I am on page 123 in my book. That's where we're at today. Page 123. Book learning. I haven't seen Mini Cake in a little while. Wonder how they're doing. Or maybe it hasn't been that long. Maybe it's only been like a week or something, but I was just thinking that. Book Sprues and Booze isn't here yet. I'm quite sleepy. Slept last night, but the night before I was up all night, as I had mentioned. After our Wednesday stream, I did not go to sleep that night. Because I was driving a friend to the hospital bright and early. And my sleep had been pretty late at that point. Falling asleep at like 6 a.m. So, considering I was going to have to be up at 6 a.m., I figured it was just better to just stay up all night and then try and reset things. Which seems to have worked so far. It's always a short-term solution for me anyways. Like, it'll only last for a few weeks at most, but yeah, I woke up at like 6:30 this morning, which is good for me. But I'm still, I think, sort of in a sleep deficit from missing the night before, so I'll definitely go to sleep pretty early tonight as well. So if I seem a little tired, it's because I am. And then, yeah, we are going out to Chilliwack tomorrow morning to visit friends. So I'm looking forward to that. Haven't seen them for a few weeks, maybe closer to a month at this point. Saying your sorceress is kind of the opposite of you IRL, so it's a fun stretch. Yeah, it's interesting to play a character that has different beliefs than you do. And, you know, especially if you're doing it with the intention of not taking too many shots at those beliefs that you don't necessarily share. Still haven't found her voice, though. Yeah, sometimes I try and plan that out before session 1, but it never works. Like, voice and personality for a character, I'll think of how I want the personality to be ahead of time. Chances are it's not going to hold true in the actual game. It'll change entirely once I start playing the character. I'd say that's more often than not the case. There's probably examples where it worked out. Mr.'s last character was fairly similar to him, Mr. Sharky, but short, says Mrs. Halfling, hobbit, gnome. Hobbits aren't generally, halflings are the hobbit equivalent in D&D. Halfling. That sounds about right. Gnomes are interesting in that I don't think they really have a Lord of the Rings equivalent. right? Because obviously D&D is very heavily influenced by Lord of the Rings. Um, Elves, dwarves, halflings, because hobbits would be too, you know, too steely, too intellectual property rights. Um, but the Tolkien spelling of elves and dwarves instead of elfs and dwarfs, which I think was more common pre-Tolkien. Orcs, right? But gnomes, I feel like, don't exactly have a Tolkien equivalent, do they? A Middle Earth equivalent? At one point, at one point he got kidnapped by authorities and roughed up, then released. When he got back, he relayed what the kidnapper said, but then casually added, "Oh yes, and I got beaten up." I like D&D gnomes. I find them interesting. Um, my first experience with them was from Dragonlance books. And I think they're a little bit more eccentric in Dragonlance books than they are in core D&D. Like they're core D&D, I think they're pretty eccentric, but in the Dragonlance world, they are they're like, you know, they're tinkerers, but to kind of a dangerous extent where it's more common than not that whatever they're building is going to explode. Farmouse says regarding the Tolkien equivalent, nothing I know of in terms of gnome equivalents. I think D&D and who knows, maybe Tolkien is probably somewhat Norse mythology based in terms of fantasy races. Sharky say I don't think gnomes have a Tolkien version, but definitely part of the historical lore he drew from Scandinavian Nisse. I like that. I probably pronounced that wrong. Says, or maybe what we look at in terms of Norse mythology races is influenced by Tolkien. I would guess that the Norse mythology came first, but you're saying that maybe we see that through a Tolkien lens. So yeah, I guess the gnomes are probably just bypassing Tolkien and going straight to Norse mythology, is what you're saying. But I do think that D&D in general is probably more originally influenced by Tolkien than by Norse mythology, or, through Tolkien in that sense. An interesting, I don't know, I kind of want to play a Dragonlance game at some point, because there's a whole Dragonlance setting, right? The world of Krynn, and there's a lot of unique things to it. And I read those books a lot when I was younger, growing up, and so I'm very familiar with the world of Krynn. And there's some things that are unique to Dragonlance that don't really make it to D&D, like Kender, as an example, as a race, which are like halflings, but more mischievous, and they've got some unique traits, like they are fearless, they are not afraid of nothing, which is sometimes a problem. And I think that's an interesting fearlessness as a character personality trait rather than just a status effect, because like paladins maybe will get immunity to fear effects and things like that, but it's interesting to think of that as an actual not feeling fear. And Dragonlance had Draconians, which are sort of like, they're they're not the same as Dragonborn. They're physically a bit different. They have wings, and they're villains. I think they're always evil, and when they die, various things happen depending on what type of draconian they are. For instance, their body might turn to stone and trap your sword in it if you stab them, or they might turn into a cloud of poison gas on death, or acid. I think some of them might explode. Farmos has read some depictions of goblins as more like knobbly underground brownies. Stretch my back a little bit. It's feeling a little sore. Oh, I missed a Sharky saying George MacDonald, who wrote 50 plus years before Tolkien and Lewis, was a strong literary influence on them, and he wrote about goblins, but they are much more like dwarves and gnomes. I see. That reminds me, tangentially, the name MacDonald. Apparently, I just saw a headline like half an hour ago. Apparently, Norm MacDonald, who passed away this year, may have recorded a comedy set for Netflix to be released in the event of his death. So there may be one last Norm MacDonald set coming out, which I am curious about. Sharky say a lot of those North Atlantic mythologies have similar beings, but with the names mixed and matched. Gnomes are like Nisei, but in English we call Christmas Nisei. Elves, as in Santa's elves. Elves are like Tolkien's, but in English tradition that's the Fae. Farmos is mentioning Keebler elves. Are kind of gnomey. Or shoe-making elves. Well, it is 7:23, so why don't we talk a little bit about this book that we're reading together. So, when last we met on Wednesday, a few apple sellers showed up at the castle. They were actually witches. First of all, Magrat and Granny both separately got themselves all made up in one way or another, looking at as formal as they could. And then they both made their way to Castle Lancre in search of Nanny Ogg, who was captured within. So they made their way into the castle. Magrat got assaulted, literally, by some guards. Sharky say, yep, you can trust a witch. If she says she's an apple seller, then that witch is an apple seller. The fool showed up and stood up for her, and then she stood up for herself. And then she did a bit of magic on the door to the torture chamber, causing it to sprout and grow, reminding it that it is in fact a tree. And then she and Granny went in, where they found the Duke and Duchess cowering in the corner as a knife floated in the air, unbeknownst to them, wielded by the ghost of King Verence. And then the Duke and Granny had a bit of a showdown, which maybe the Duke actually kind of came out ahead in, surprisingly. And although at the end of which Granny pointed out that the child of King Verence might come one day to defeat the Duke. And that's where we're at. It was yeah, I think that covers most of what happened in the last thing. It was not a large period of time as far as this book is concerned. It's just that it was dense in those events that did happen. Yeah. So, 7:26. I think if anyone else is going to show up, they are officially quite late, so I'm going to start reading. Everybody ready? Like I said, page 123 of Wyrd Sisters, though we're near the bottom of that page. Okay. Granny Weatherwax stalked through the passages of Lancre Castle like a large, angry bat, the Duke's laughter echoing around her head. "You could have given him boils or something," said Nanny Ogg. "Hemorrhoids are good. That's allowed. It won't stop him ruling. It just means he'll have to rule standing up. Always good for a laugh, that. Or piles." Nanny Ogg is so petty. Granny Weatherwax said nothing. If fury were heat, her hat would have caught fire. Sharky say, "I love Nanny Ogg." "Mind you, that'd probably make him worse," said Nanny, running to keep up. "Same with toothache." She gave a sideways glance at Granny's twitching features. "You needn't fret," she said. "They didn't do anything much. But thanks anyway." "I ain't worried about you, Githa Ogg," snapped Granny. "I only come along 'cause Magrat was frettin'. What I say is, if a witch can't look after herself, she's got no business calling herself a witch." "Magrat done well with the woodwork, I thought." Even in the grip of her sullen fury, Granny Weatherwax spared a nod. "She's coming along," she said. She looked up and down the corridor, then leaned closer to Nanny Ogg's ear. "I ain't going to give him the pleasure of saying it," she said, "but he's got us beaten." "Well, I don't know," said Nanny. "Our Jason and a few sharp lads could soon—" "You saw some of his guards. These aren't the old sort. These are a tough kind." "We could give the boys just a bit of help." "It wouldn't work. People have to sort this sort of thing out for themselves." "If you say so, Esme," said Nanny meekly. "I do. Magic's there to be ruled, not for ruling." Nanny nodded, and then, remembering a promise, reached down and picked up a fragment of stone from the rubble on the tunnel floor. "I thought you'd forgotten," said the ghost of the king by her ear. Further down the passage, picked up the piece of rubble. I get it. Books, Brews, and Booze. I'm sorry. Yes, we've only just started. Um, like, literally, we're one page in. I am on page 124 right now. We started at the bottom of 123. Sharky's copy is at 156. Wow, that's a drastic difference. Like, what is that, 26 pages? I'm on 124 in my copy. 124. We started on 123. Literally, all that's happened is Granny fuming and Nanny suggesting that she could give the Duke hemorrhoids, or piles, or maybe a toothache. But then that might make him worse. And Granny is just saying that the Duke has them beaten. And what just happened was Nanny remembered a promise, reached down, and picked up a fragment of stone from the rubble on the tunnel floor. The ghost of the king said, "I'd thought you'd forgotten." So, what do you think? Is that a clever workaround? What do people think that piece of rubble is for? I think it is a way to bend the rules. Not that I haven't read this book before, but it's been a long time and I don't remember a lot of details. Just sort of the overall plot. Excuse me. Farmo says, I can't comment because I know. All right. Further down the passage, the fool was capering after Magrat. "Can I see you again?" he said. The more I read of the fool, the more I somewhat regret giving him the fool's voice. It was intentional as I figure that he's putting on this act. But now I'm thinking maybe he should have just been deadpan the whole time. Books, Brews, and Booze is pulling a feeding cat lurk. All right. They're both saying I could always change the voice. Should I change the voice? Is he too goofy? Don't forget, he used to play the fool, but then also got into bouts of intellect. Yeah. Call it a character arc, say the Sharkies. Alright, I'll tone it down. "Can I see you again?" he said. "Well, I don't know," said Magrat, her heart singing a smug song. "How about tonight?" said the fool. "Oh, no," said Magrat. "I'm very busy tonight." She had intended to curl up with a hot milk drink and Goody Whimper's notebooks on experimental astrology, but instinct told her that any suitor should have an uphill struggle put in front of him, just to make him keener. "Tomorrow night, then?" the fool persisted. "I think I should be washing my hair." "I could get Friday night free?" "We do a lot of work at night, you see. The afternoon, then?" Magrat hesitated. Perhaps instinct had got it wrong. "Well," she said, "about 2 o'clock, in the meadow by the pond, all right?" "Well, see you there, then, all right?"
said the fool desperately. Just making sure I haven't skipped a footnote, because there... Okay, no, it's not until much later. Fool! The Duchess's voice echoed along the passage, and a look of terror crossed his face. I've got to go, he said. The meadow, okay? I'll wear something so you recognize me. All right? All right, echoed Magrat, hypnotized by the sheer pressure of his persistence. She turned and ran after the other witches. There was pandemonium outside the castle. The crowd that had been there at Granny's arrival had grown considerably, and had flowed in through the now unguarded gateway and lapped around the keep. Civil disobedience was new to Lancre, but its inhabitants had already mastered some of its more elementary manifestations, viz., the jerking of rakes and sickles in the air with simple up and down motions, accompanied by grimaces and cries of "Grr!" Although a few citizens, who hadn't quite grasped the idea, were waving flags and cheering. Advanced students were already eyeing the more combustible buildings inside the walls. Several sellers of hot meat pies and sausages in a bun, not in a bun, to be clear, they're not that advanced, had appeared from nowhere. Footnote, they always do, everywhere. No one sees them arrive. The logical explanation is that the franchise includes the stall, the paper hat, and a small gas-powered time machine. End of footnote. Had appeared from nowhere and were doing a brisk trade. Pretty soon, someone was going to throw something. No, they are not sausages -in-a-bun. They are sausages in a bun, all separate. We do not have a CMOT Dibbler on our hands here. Or any of his cousins or anything, apparently. For anyone that hasn't read much else in the Discworld series, in the city of Ankh-Morpork, there is a character that goes by the name of Cut Me Own Throat Dibbler, CMOT Dibbler, who, anytime any crowd is gathered anywhere, he's there selling usually sausages in a bun, frequently other knickknacks and folk remedies and snake oils and like souvenirs, things like that. Sharkies say, when we went to Vancouver during the Stanley Cup Finals more than a decade ago, the crowd just before the riot had the same feeling in the air. Oh boy, what an event that was, huh? The three witches stood at the top of the steps that led to the keep's main door and surveyed the sea of faces. There's our Jason, said Nanny happily, and Wayne, and Darren, and Kev, and Trev, and Nev. I will remember their faces, said Lord Felmet, emerging between them and putting a hand on their shoulders. And do you see my archers on the walls? I see 'em, said Granny grimly. Then smile and wave, said the Duke, so that the people may know that all is well. After all, have you not been to see me today on matters of state? He leaned closer to Granny. Yes, there are 100 things you could do, he said, but the ending would always be the same. He drew back. I'm not an unreasonable man, I hope, he added in cheerful tones. Perhaps, if you persuade the people to be calm, I may be prevailed upon to moderate my rule somewhat. I make no promises, of course. He got real slimy. I mean, he was slimy before, but he's gotten real slimy. Foremost talking about Dibbler says his primary state of being is selling meat pies and sausages, parentheses, in dash bun, or INNA bun. Granny said nothing. Smile and wave, commanded the Duke. Granny raised one hand in a vague motion and produced a brief rictus that had nothing whatsoever to do with humor. Then she scowled and nudged Nanny Og, who was waving and mugging like a maniac. No need to get carried away, she hissed. But there's our Reet and our Charlene and their babbies, said Nanny. Cooey! Will you shut up, you daft old besom, snapped Granny, and pull yourself together. Sharky say, well, Felmet has gone crazy, or perhaps he feels out of control of everything most of the time. He seizes his power when he can. Jolly good. Well done, said the Duke. He raised his hands, or at least his hand. The other still ached. He'd tried the grater again last night, but it hadn't worked. Ah yes, grate out the blood. People of Lancre, he cried, do not be afeared. I am your friend. I will protect you from the witches. They have agreed to leave you in peace. Granny stared at him as he spoke. He's one of these here maniac depressives, she said. Up and down like a wasp name. Kill you one minute and ask you how you're feeling the next. She became aware that he was looking at her expectantly. What? I said, I'll now call upon the respected Granny Weatherwax to say a few words. Ha, ha, he said. You said that, did you? Yes. You've gone a long way too far, said Granny. I have, haven't I? The Duke giggled. Granny turned to the expectant crowds, which were silent. Go home, she said. There was a further long silence. Is that all? Said the Duke. Yes. What about pledges of eternal allegiance? What about them? Githa, will you stop waving at people? Sorry. And now we are going to go too, said Granny. But we were getting on so well, said the Duke. Come, Githa, said Granny icily. And where's Magrat got to? Magrat looked up guiltily. She had been deep in conversation with the fool, although it was the kind of conversation where both parties spend a lot of time looking at their feet and picking at their fingernails. 90% of true love is acute, ear-burning embarrassment. We're leaving, said Granny. Friday afternoon, remember? hissed the fool. Well, if I can, said Magrat. Nanny Og leered. And so Granny Weatherwax swept down the stairs and through the crowds, with the other two running behind her. Several of the grinning guards caught her eye and wished they hadn't. But here and there, among the watching crowd, was a barely suppressed snigger. She hurtled through the gateway, across the drawbridge, and through the town. Granny, walking fast, could beat most other people at a run. Sharkies, imagine Nanny Og's leer has a nice exaggerated eyebrow waggle. Behind them, the Duke, who had crested the latest maniac peak on the switchback of his madness, and was coasting speedily toward the watersplash of despair, laughed. Ha! Ha! Pharma says probably about as settled as a tidal wave. I think you typed that before I read the bit about the water splash of despair. Granny didn't stop until she was outside the town and under the welcoming eaves of the forest. She turned off the road and flumped down on a log, her face in her hands. The other two approached her carefully. Magrat patted her on the back. Don't despair, she said. You handled it very well, we thought. I ain't despairing, I'm thinking, said Granny. Go away. Nanny Og raised her eyebrows at Magrat in a warning fashion. They backed off to a suitable distance, although, with Granny in her present mood, the next universe might not be far enough, and sat down on a moss-grown stone. Are you all right? Said Magrat. They didn't do anything, did they? Never laid a finger on me, said Nanny. She sniffed. They're not your real royalty, she added. Old King Grunewald, for one. He wouldn't have wasted time waving things around and menacing people. It'd be bang, needles right under the fingernails from the word go, and no missing. None of this evil laughter stuff. He was a real king, very gracious. He was threatening to burn you. Oh, I wouldn't have stood for it. I see you've got a follower, said Nanny. Sorry? Said Magrat. The young fellow with the bells, said Nanny, and the face like a spaniel what's just been kicked. Oh, him. Magrat blushed hotly under her pale makeup. Really, he's just this man. He just follows me around. Can be difficult, can that? Said Nanny sagely. Besides, he's so small, and he capers all over the place, said Magrat. Looked at him carefully, have you? Said the old witch. Pardon? You haven't, have you? I thought not. He's a very clever man, that fool. He ought to have been one of them actor men. What do you mean? Next time, you have a look at him like a witch, not like a woman, said Nanny, and gave Magrat a conspiratorial nudge. Good bit of work with the door back there, she added. Coming on well, you are. I hope you told him about Grebo. He said he'd let him out directly, Nanny. There was a snort from Granny Weatherwax. Did you hear the sniggering in the crowd? She said. Someone sniggered. That was a weird honk. Nanny Ogg sat down beside her. And a couple of them pointed, she said. I know. It's not to be borne. Magrat sat down on the other end of the log. There's other witches, she said. There's lots of witches further up the Ramtops. Maybe they can help. The other two looked at her in pained surprise. I don't think we need to go that far, sniffed Granny. Asking for help. Very bad practice, nodded Nanny Ogg. But you asked a demon to help you, said Magrat. No, we didn't, said Granny. Right, we didn't. We ordered it to assist. 'S right. Granny Weatherwax stretched out her legs and looked at her boots. They were good, strong boots, with hobnails and crescent-shaped scads. You couldn't believe a cobbler had made them. Someone had laid down a sole and built up from there. I mean, there's that witch over Scund way, she said. Sister Whosis, what's name? Her son went off to be a sailor. You know, Githa, her who sniffs and puts them anti-massacres on the backs of chairs soon as you sit down. Grodley, said Nanny Ogg. Sticks her little finger up when she drinks her tea and drops her H's all the time. Yes. Well, I haven't lowered myself to talk to her ever since that business with the gibbet, you recall. I dare say she'd just love to come snooping around here, running her fingers over everything and sniffling, telling us how to do things. Oh, yes. Help. We'd all be in a fine to-do if we went around helping all the time. Yes, and over Scund way the trees talk to you and walk around of night, said Nanny, without even asking permission. Very poor organization. Not really good organization, like we've got here, said Magrat. Granny stood up purposefully. I'm going home, she said. There are thousands of good reasons why magic doesn't rule the world. They're called witches and wizards, Magrat reflected, as she followed the other two back to the road. It was probably some wonderful organization on the part of nature to protect itself. It saw to it that everyone with any magical talent was about as ready to cooperate as a she-bear with a toothache. So, all that dangerous power was safely dissipated as random bickering and rivalry. There were differences in style, of course. Wizards assassinated each other in drafty corridors. Witches just cut one another dead in the street. And they were all as self-centered as a spinning top. Nice. Even when they help other people, she thought, they're secretly doing it for themselves. Honestly, they're just like big children. Except for me, she thought smugly. Farmhouse is saying it should have been gibbet, not gibbet.
Something was way worse than outright laughing. Oh, sniggering. Did it get censored? I always feel like I need to be very careful because that word has come up. I think it was also in Guards at one point. Snigger, as in to laugh. It's not censored on your end. On my end, it goes asterisk, asterisk, asterisk is way worse than outright laughing. So you got censored. Twitch thinks you're a racist. It's interesting that it doesn't show you that you've been censored. She's very upset, isn't she? Said Magrat to Nanny Og.
Ah, well, said Nanny. There's the problem, see? The more you get used to magic, the more you don't want to use it. The more it gets in your way. I expect, when you were just starting out, you learned a few spells from Goody Whemper, may she rest in peace, and you used them all the time, didn't you?
Well, yes. Everyone does.
Well-known fact, agreed Nanny. But when you get along in the craft, capital C, you learn that the hardest magic is the sort you don't use at all.
Magrat considered the proposition cautiously. This isn't some kind of Zen, is it? She said.
Dunno. Never seen one.
Sharkies are saying, I was thinking my brain thinks of the word as snickered. Regional differences? Definitely seen both words. I don't know if they are, in fact, the same word. Because if they're not, they're very, very similar. They both mean similar things. I don't know. They probably mean the same thing. It's probably the same word. I wonder if it's for that reason. Sharky say maybe a North Americanization to avoid problematic sounds. Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's what I should say when I'm reading that word. Maybe I should change it to snickered. Because it's definitely like a little uncomfortable to read. I'm always like, I gotta make sure that it's very clear that there's an S at the front. So maybe I should just change that. When we were in the dungeons, Granny said something about trying the rocks. That sounded like pretty hard magic.
Well,
trying the rocks, hard magic.
Well, Goody wasn't much into rocks, said Nanny. It's not really hard. You just prod their memories. You know, of the old days, when they were hot and runny.
She hesitated, and her hand flew to her pocket. She gripped the lump of castle stone and relaxed.
Thought I'd forgotten it for a minute, she said, lifting it out. You can come out now.
Sharky saying, runny rocks, yeah. He was barely visible in the brightness of day, a mere shimmer in the air under the trees. King Verence blinked. He wasn't used to daylight.
Esme, said Nanny, there's someone to see you.
Granny turned slowly and squinted at the ghost.
I saw you in the dungeon, didn't I? She said. Who are you? "Verence, King of Lancre," said the ghost, and bowed. "Do I have the honor of addressing Granny Weatherwax, doyenne of witches?" Probably pronounced that wrong. Doyenne, not capitalized. It has already been pointed out that just because Verence came from a long line of kings didn't mean that he was basically stupid. And a year without the distractions of the flesh had done wonders as well. Granny Weatherwax considered herself totally unsusceptible to buttering up, but the king was expertly applying the equivalent of the dairy surplus of quite a large country. Bowing was a particularly good touch. Farmer's talking about the words snicker. It is apparently British versus North American versions, snickered being the North American version, which makes sense. Sharky say, yep, that's why the British version sounds weird to my ears. Yeah. A muscle twitched at the corner of Granny's mouth. She gave a stiff little bow in return, because she wasn't quite sure what doyenne meant. I thought, oh, witches never curtsy. They do bow. Right. "I'm her," she conceded. You can get up now," she added, regally. Farmer's saying either doy-en or doyen. King Verence remained kneeling, about 2 inches above the actual ground. "I crave a boon," he said urgently. "Here, how did you get out of the castle?" said Granny. "The esteemed Nanny Og assisted me," said the king. "I reasoned, if I am anchored to the stones of Lancre, then I can also go where the stones go. I am afraid I indulged in a little trickery to arrange matters. Currently, I am hunting her apron." "Not the first either," said Granny automatically. "Esme!" I feel like that's as close as you're ever going to get to, like, Granny saying, like, that's what she said or something, you know? Your mama. Books for Boo says this might be my most favorite passage. Currently I am haunting her apron. Not the first either. Esme! "And I beg you, Granny Weatherwax, to restore my son to the throne." "Restore?" "You know what I mean. He is in good health?" Granny nodded. "The last time we looked at him, capital L, he was eating an apple," she said. "It is his destiny to be King of Lancre." "Yes, well, destiny is tricky, you know," said Granny. "You will not help?" Granny looked wretched. "It's meddling, you see," she said. "It always goes wrong if you meddle in politics. Like, once you start, you can't stop. Fundamental rule of magic is that. You can't go around messing with fundamental rules." "You're not going to help?" "Well, Naturally, one day, when your lad is a bit older—" "Where is he now?" said the king, coldly. The witches avoided one another's faces. "We saw him safe out of the country, you see," said Granny, awkwardly. "Very good family," Nanny Og put in quickly. "What kind of people?" said the king. "Not commoners, I trust." "Absolutely not," said Granny, with considerable firmness, as a vision of Vituller floated across her imagination. "Not common at all. Very uncommon. Her eyes implored Magrat for help. "They were thespians," said Magrat firmly, her voice radiating such approval that the king found himself nodding automatically. "Oh," he said. "Good."
"Were they?" whispered Nanny Og. "They didn't look it."
There it is. That joke was bound to happen.
"Don't show your ignorance, Githa Og," sniffed Granny.
She turned back to the ghost of the king. "Sorry about that, your majesty. It's just her showing off. She don't even know where Thespia is." Funny, she doesn't look Druish. Druidia! Spruce Bruce says Druidia is right next to Thespia. "Wherever it is, I hope that they know how to school a man in the arts of war," said Verence. "I know Felmet. In 10 years, he'll be dug in here like a toad in a stone."
Do toads dig into stones?
The king looked from witch to witch. "What kind of kingdom will he have to come back to? I hear what the kingdom is becoming even now. Will you watch it change over the years, become shoddy and mean?" The king's ghost faded. His voice hung in the air, faint as a breeze. "Remember, good sisters," he said, "the land and the king are one." And he vanished. The embarrassed silence was broken by Magrat blowing her nose.
"On what?"
said Nanny Og. "We've got to do something," said Magrat, her voice choked with emotion. "Rules or no rules." "It's very vexing," said Granny quietly. "Yes, but what are you going to do?" she said. "Reflect on things," said Granny. "Think about it all." "You've been thinking about it for a year," Magrat said.
"On what? On what?"
said Nanny Og. "It's no good just reacting," said Granny. "You've got to—" A cart came bouncing and rumbling along the track from Lanker. Granny ignored it. Give these things careful consideration. You don't know what to do you? Said Magrat. Nonsense.
There's a cart coming, Granny.
Granny Weatherwax shrugged. What you youngsters don't realize, she began. Witches never bothered with elementary road safety. Such traffic as there was on the roads of Lancre either went around them, or, if this was not possible, waited until they moved out of the way. Granny Weatherwax had grown up knowing this for a fact. The only reason she didn't die knowing it was that it was... the only reason she didn't die knowing that it wasn't was that Magrat, with rather better reflexes, dragged her into the ditch. Something about the construction of that sentence, I am having trouble wrapping my brain around how I'm supposed to emphasize it. Granny Weatherwax had grown up knowing this for a fact. The only reason she didn't die knowing that it wasn't was that Magrat, with rather better reflexes, dragged her into the ditch. There we go. Bookspurs and Brew says, that's interesting. The land and the king are one. Well, it ties in definitely with the kingdom being upset. Sharky said that it wasn't a fact. Yeah, it was just, I had trouble getting the emphasis right the first time. I needed to read it a second time through to get it right. It was an interesting ditch. There were jiggling corkscrew things in it, which were direct descendants of things which had been in the primordial soup of creation. Anyone who thought that ditch water was dull could have spent an instructive half-hour in that ditch with a powerful microscope. It also had nettles in it. And now it had Granny Weatherwax. She struggled up through the weeds, incoherent with rage, and rose from the ditch like Venus Anadyomene. Venus Anadyomene. Only older and with more duckweed. She said, pointing a shaking finger at the disappearing cart.
It was young Neshley from over Inkcap way,
said Nanny Og from a nearby bush.
His family were always a bit wild. Of course, his mother was a whipple.
His mupple was a wither. His mother was a whipple. He ran us down, said Granny. You could have got out of the way, said Magrat. Get out of the way, said Granny. We're witches. People get out of our way. She squelched onto the track, her finger still pointing at the distant cart. By hokey, I'll make him wish he'd never been born.
He was quite a big baby, I recall, said the bush. His mother had a terrible time.
It's never happened to me before, ever, said Granny, still twanging like a bowstring. I'll teach him to run us down as though we was ordinary people. He already knows, said Magrat. Just help me get Nanny out of this bush, will you? I'll turn his...
People haven't got any respect anymore. That's what it is,
said Nanny, as Magrat helped her with the thorns.
It's all due to the king being one, I expect.
We're witches, screamed Granny, turning her face toward the sky and shaking her fist. I catch up on chat because there's been some posts. Let's see. Let's see. Books, Brews, and Brews. Venus Anadyomene. I'm probably butchering that name. From Greek, Venus rising from the sea. Ah, I did not know that that was the name of the painting, but yes, I am definitely familiar with it. Or I guess of the... It says made famous by the painting. And Farmo says Anadiamene. Or maybe Mene. Anadiamene. Untangling my tongue. We're witches, screamed Granny, turning her face toward the sky and shaking her fists. Yes, yes, said Magrat. The harmonious balance of the universe and everything. I think Nanny's a bit tired.
What have I been doing all this time?
Said Granny with a rhetorical flourish that would have made even Vittler gasp. Not a lot, said Magrat.
Laughed at! Laughed at! On my own roads! In my own country! Screamed Granny. That just about does it! I'm not taking 10 more years of this. I'm not taking another day of it.
The trees around her began to sway, and the dust from the road sprang up into writhing shapes that tried to swirl out of her way. Granny Weatherwax extended one long arm, and at the end of it unfolded one long finger, and from the tip of its curving nail there was a brief flare of octarine fire. For anyone that's not familiar, octarine is the color of magic, and it is described as being a kind of greenish purple, and also impossible. Half a mile down the track, all 4 wheels fell off the cart at once.
Lock up a witch, would he?
Granny shouted at the trees. Nanny struggled to her feet. We'd better grab her, she whispered to Magrat. The 2 of them leapt at Granny and forced her arms down to her sides.
I'll bloody well show him what a witch could do, she yelled.
Yes, yes, very good, said Nanny. Only perhaps not just now and not just like this, eh?
Weird sisters indeed, Granny yelled. I'll make his...
Hold her a minute, Magrat, said Nanny Og, and rolled up her sleeve. It can be like this with the highly trained ones, she said, and brought her palm around in a slap that lifted both witches off their feet. On such a flat, final note, the universe might have ended. At the conclusion of the breathless silence which followed, Granny Weatherwax said, "Thank you." She adjusted her dress with some show of dignity, and added, "But I meant it. We'll meet tonight at the stone and do what must be done. Ahem." She reset the pins in her hat and set off unsteadily in the direction of her cottage. "Whatever happened to the rule about not meddling in politics?" said Magrat, watching her retreating back. Nanny Og massaged some life back into her fingers. "By hokey, that woman's got a jaw like an anvil," she said. "What was that?" "I said, what about this rule about not meddling?" said Magrat. "Ah," said Nanny. She took the girl's arm. "The thing is," she explained, "as you progress in the craft, you'll learn there is another rule, Esme's obeyed it all her life.
And what's that?
When you break rules, break 'em good and hard, said Nanny, and grinned a set of gums that were more menacing than teeth.
Parmo says the stone. Bookspruce and Bruce says my favorite character. Alright, we're at 8:20. Let's see how long this next section is, because I am quite tired. It's only a few more pages, so let's get through that.
The Duke smiled out over the forest. "It works," he said. "The people mutter against the witches. How do you do it, fool?" "Jokes, nuncle, and gossip."
He's putting on the act now.
"People are halfway ready to believe it anyway. Everyone respects the witches. The point is that no one actually likes them very much."
Friday afternoon, he thought. I'll have to get some flowers. And my best suit, the one with the silver bells. Oh gosh. "This is very pleasing. If it goes on like this, fool, you shall have a knighthood." This was number 302, and the fool knew better than to let a feed line go hungry. "Marry, nuncle," he said wearily, ignoring the spasm of pain that crawled across the Duke's face. "If'n I had a knighthood, knighthood, why, it would keep my ears warm in bed. If many a knight is a fool, why should a—" Yes, all right," snapped Lord Felmet. In fact, he was feeling much better already. His porridge hadn't been oversalted this evening.
Parmos is saying knighthood or knighthood. It's spelled out in the book. The parentheses bit was not my doing. It's right here. Knighthood. Oh, apparently I didn't mute my phone. There we go. Yeah, but oh, okay, all right. I guess when I said knighthood parentheses knighthood, I didn't spell it out. It just made sense in my head. That's how tired I am. Version Ruse thought it was the magical dishwasher again. No, just my phone getting a message because Slightly Stupid Bear is going live, apparently. So it's getting it was a Twitch notification. Ahem. And Lord Felmet's food was not oversalted, so I'm thinking maybe the ghost of King Varence might be gone for good. When he faded away, that might have been him fading away permanently. Sharky say, one of the reasons that Discworld is hard to put on film, there's so much of the craft in the writing that has to be read. Yeah, there's definitely jokes that just don't translate out loud very well. Which again, I'm wondering how the audiobook format is handling that now that they're doing audiobooks. I've got a professional curiosity. And by professional, I mean, I'm not like I'm a professional in the slightest, but I've got an amateur curiosity. His porridge hadn't been oversalted this evening, and there was a decently empty feel about the castle. There were no more voices on the cusp of hearing. He sat down on the throne. It felt really comfortable for the first time.
The Duchess sat beside him, her chin on her hand, watching the fool intently. This bothered him. He thought he knew where he stood with the Duke. It was just a matter of hanging on until his madness curved back to the cheerful stage. But the Duchess genuinely frightened him. "It seems that words are extremely powerful," she said. "Indeed, lady. You must have made a lengthy study." The fool nodded. The power of words had sustained him through the hell of the guild. Wizards and witches used words as if they were tools to get things done. But the fool reckoned that words were things in their own right. "Words can change the world," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "So you have said before. I remain unconvinced. Strong men change the world," she said. "Strong men and their deeds. Words are just like marzipan on a cake. Of course, you think words are important. You are weak. You have nothing else. Your ladyship is wrong." The Duchess's fat hand drummed impatiently on the arm of her throne. "You had better," she said, "be able to substantiate that comment." "Lady, the Duke wishes to chop down the forests. Is this not so?" "The trees talk about me," whispered Lord Felmet. "I hear them whisper when I go riding. They tell lies about me." The Duchess and the fool exchanged glances. "But," the fool continued, "this policy is met with fanatical opposition." "What?" "People don't like it." The Duchess exploded. "What does that matter?" she roared. "We rule. They will do what we say, or they will be pitilessly executed." The fool bobbed and capered and waved his hands in a conciliatory fashion. "But, my love, we will run out of people," murmured the Duke. "No need, no need," said the fool desperately. "You don't have to do that at all. What you do is He paused for a moment, his lips moving quickly. "You embark upon a far-reaching and ambitious plan to expand the agricultural industry, provide long-term employment in the sawmills, open new land for development, and reduce the scope for banditry." This time the Duke looked baffled. "How will I do that?" he said. "Chop down the forests." "But you said—" "Shut up, Felmet," said the Duchess. She subjected the fool to another long, thoughtful stare. "Exactly how," she said eventually, "does one go about knocking over the houses of people one does not like?" "Urban clearance," said the fool. "I was thinking of burning them down." "Hygienic urban clearance," the fool added promptly. "And sowing the ground with salt." "Marry, I expect that is hygienic urban clearance and a program of environmental improvements. It might be a good idea to plant a few trees as well." "No more trees!" shouted Felmet. "Oh, it's all right. They won't survive. The important thing is to have planted them." "But I also want us to raise taxes," said the Duchess. "Why, nuncle, and I am not your nuncle." "Nant?" said the fool. No. Why, prithee, you need to finance your ambitious program for the country.
Sorry, said the Duke, who was getting lost again. He means that chopping down trees costs money, said the Duchess. She smiled at the fool. It was the first time he had ever seen her look at him as if he was other than a disgusting little cockroach. There was still a large element of cockroach in her glance, but it said, "Good little cockroach, you have learned a trick." "Intriguing," she said, "but can your words change the past?" The fool considered this. "More easily, I think," he said, "because the past is what people remember, and memories are words. Who knows how a king behaved 1,000 years ago? There's only recollection and stories. And plays, of course."
And plays. "Ah, yes, I saw a play once," said Felmet. "Bunch of funny fellows in tights. A lot of shouting. The people liked it."
"You tell me history is what people are told," said the Duchess. The fool looked around the throne room and found King Groonberry the Good, 906 to 967. "Was he?" he said, pointing. "Who knows now? What was he good at? But he will be Groonberry the Good until the end of the world." The Duke was leaning forward in his throne, his eyes gleaming. "I want to be a good ruler," he said. "I want people to like me. I would like people to remember me fondly." "Let us assume," said the Duchess, "that there were other matters subject to controversy. Matters of historical record that had been clouded." "I didn't do it, you know," said the Duke quickly. "He slipped and fell. That was it. Slipped and fell. I wasn't even there. He attacked me. It was self-defense." His voice fell to a mumble. "I have no recollection of it at this time," he murmured.
I wonder if that particular "I have no recollection of it at this time," I wonder if that is a shot at someone in particular, at some politician or something. I wonder if there was some significant reference in, I don't know, UK politics. Or if it's just a, thing that people say when they're on the stand. Spurgeon Booze says, "Good thing courts don't exist. Good thing for the king, that is." This book, my copy says copyright 1980 by Terry and Lynn Pratchett, 1988. I'm not sure if it was published originally in 1980 then. Farmer says, "Yeah, you do not want to put him on the stand." You think they're talking about in Lancashire? What? No, I'm talking about me. I'm talking about, I wonder if the "I have no recollection of it at this time" is in reference to some UK thing that happened, some political thing or something like that. He rubbed his dagger hand, although the word was becoming inappropriate. Ugh. That's rough. Meaning the word hand
is becoming inappropriate. Be quiet, husband, snapped the Duchess. I know you didn't do it. I wasn't there with you, you may recall. It was I who didn't hand you the dagger. The Duke shuddered again. And now, fool, said Lady Felmet, I was saying, I believe, that perhaps there are matters that should be properly recorded. Marry, that you were not there at the time, said the fool brightly. It is true that words have power, and one of the things they are able to do is get out of someone's mouth before the speaker has the chance to stop them. If words were sweet, sweet little lambs, then the fool watched them bound cheerfully away into the flamethrower of the Duchess's glare. Not where, she said. Anywhere, said the fool hastily. Stupid man, everyone is somewhere. I mean, you were everywhere but at the top of the stairs, said the fool. Which stairs? Any stairs, said the fool, who was beginning to sweat. I distinctly remember not seeing you. The Duchess eyed him for a while. So long as you remember it, she said. The Duchess rubbed her chin, which made an audible rasping noise. Buckspurs and Brews says the family that slays together stays together. Mm-hmm. Reality is only weak words, you say. Therefore, words are reality. But how can words become history? It was a very good play, the play that I saw, said Felmet dreamily. There were fights, and no one really died. Some very good speeches, I thought. There was another sandpapery sound from the Duchess. Fool, she said. Lady, can you write a play? A play that will go around the world. A play that will be remembered long after rumor has died? No, lady, it is a special talent. But can you find someone who has it? There are such people, lady. Find one, murmured the Duke. Find the best. Find the best. The truth will out. Find one. Well, it is apparent in which direction this is heading. Oh boy, and it is 8:40 in my time. I think I'm going to stop there because I'm very sleepy. Bookspurs and Brews says, I wonder who they will find. Yeah, there are so many playwrights out there right now, these days. Can't go 20 steps without tripping over a playwright. That wasn't a dwarf joke. Because the playwright, the only playwright in the book so far, is a dwarf. Farmo says, wow. Sharky say, the play. The play is the thing that will clear the conscience of the Duke. Yeah. Parts of this book are clearly influenced by the Scottish play, but I think it's much more so Hamlet.
But it does seem to be like a few different Shakespearean plays all kind of smushed together and then discworlded. The truth will out. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh. Anyone have good plans for the weekend? At present, I am haunting her apron. Wouldn't be the first. Firmo says there are some things you just have to say, even if it's not appropriate at the time. You and everyone else. Zing, says Books, Brews, and Booze. Sharky's mostly the kids have exciting activities, and they're facilitating that. The infamous granny burn. Like the knighthood line. That one I think is less automatic. That one was more training. Because that was a numbered joke. That was one of the guild-approved numbered jokes. Someone set him up so he had to say it. Yeah, but like I said, that's not reflexive. That's training. That's drilled in. He had to say it because, it's his job. You can train reflexes. That's not the same, though. Books, Brews, and Brews, pretty quiet weekend. Probably going to stream and read Sherlock Holmes tomorrow on Sunday. What are you starting with? Was it A Study in Red, or have you not said which one you were starting with yet? Scarlet, Study in Scarlet. Red, Scarlet. Sharky say muscle memory is different than hormonal instinct. Vocal reflex, says Farmos. We are going to visit some friends this weekend. Booksperson Brews says, started with Scarlet and now you're on the Sign of Four. Ooh. Sign of the Four. Yeah, they're fairly short stories, aren't they? Is this your first time reading Sherlock Holmes? And if so, is it different than you expected? I don't remember whether or not I've actually ever read any myself, but my understanding is that they are not exactly mysteries in the way that modern mysteries would be written. Modern mysteries, you might have like clues dropped and things like that, versus Sherlock Holmes is more like Sherlock walked into the room. He saw what had happened and then says what happened. Like, there aren't really ways for you to predict the story yourself. Oh, just Sign of Four, not Sign of the Four. Sharky say Hounds of Baskerville is the only longish one, if they recall. Spurs and Booze might have read a short story at one point, but can't recall a thing of it. Yeah. I really should get around to reading that myself sometime. Sherlock Holmes. Some of those. Sharky say Holmes books play out a lot less like an Agatha Christie story, less built to play along. Booksperson Brew says, yep, Sherlock just seems to know everything, and we just kind of wait for him to tell us. Yeah, that sounds right. Sounds like what I had heard. It's funny for such short stories, and like the way that it actually seems to have been, how much like modern media drags those out into huge long stories that are, based on the bones of the actual writing, but not really not really all that similar. Should I say, almost like Arthur Conan Doyle is showing us how much smarter than the reader Sherlock or Holmes is. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so my weekend is going to be going out to a different city. It's like an hour and a half drive away to visit some friends for the weekend. So that'll be fun. Lots of games and jokes and things, I'm sure. So we're heading out tomorrow morning for that. Well, whatever everybody ends up getting into, I hope it's fun. Sharkies, I hope, even if you're just facilitating fun, I hope you have fun as well. And yeah, I will see you all. Sharky say, Mr. played Holmes once in a play. He was not very smart. I see, I see. That would be fun. I played D'Artagnan as far as, classical literature. It was a parody of another bad play in a director's festival. Wow. All right, yeah. Good night, good weekend, everyone. I'm gonna raid out to Bear, to Slightly Stupid Bear. So let's go say hi to him. He's a fun person. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Have a good weekend. I'll see you. Did that even work? The raid? Where's the raid? Oh, there it is. Yeah. See you all next Wednesday. Bye.